I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Special thanks to all of our friends in the uh, KFAI space of the world that we connect at kfai.org and here at 90.3 FM. And thanks to all of us who are joining by the variety of social media platforms that we've developed to create community. You may be checking us out at the Black Press USA YouTube channel. Shout out to National Newspaper Publishers Association, or you may be watching the Insight News YouTube channel. We're also connecting with you on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. However you're involved, we want you to do one thing: help us grow the subscribers, and we're using Insight's YouTube channel as the medium for documenting and creating that growth. We've got around 300 or so subscribers right now. We'd like everybody listening, everybody watching on any of the other social media platforms to click over to Insight News YouTube and subscribe to this program. Also share, like, call somebody, tell them we're live here, and what we are going to be experiencing is what I've always called a robust conversation. Well, we start as always. Before I do hot topics, I want to say that my guests today are wonderful guests. My friend Corey Day, former executive director of the Minnesota DFL and now the leader at Blue Ox Strategies, talking about the political challenges and opportunities now that we've got this massive $18 billion budget surplus. Then we're going to also talk with Coach Leah. Leahjean Denley used to be and has returned now as the sports editor for Insight News, but she's doing so much more in the country, in the world, with young people and with healing, bringing hope and opportunity. So those are the guests for today's program. I want to start off, as I normally do, with hot topics. And I can tell you the hottest topic right now is that tonight at the Dakota Jazz Club, my friend Juan DeMarcos Gonzalez, the co-creator of Buena Vista Social Club and the leader and creator of the Afro-Cuban All-Stars, returns to the Dakota Jazz Club. Two performances tonight, one at 6:30, one at 8:30. So if you don't know, the Afro-Cuban All-Stars is a unique orchestra. It's devoted to promoting the complete story of Cuban music, and all of their shows expose Cuba's rich musical history, interpreting all of the nation's musical genres. With the All-Stars, Marcos DeMarcos has developed much more than a musical group. He's created an institution. This formula he's evolved or developed stretches his creative wings, fusing contemporary, traditional, and in essence, the future styles of Cuban music. Juan DeMarcos Gonzalez is the architect of the Buena Vista Social Club. After gaining international fame for reviving the classic sound of Cuban son, he's a tres instrument master turned the Afro-Cuban All-Stars into a sensational showcase for Cuba's most prodigious young artists, musicians, and performers. So Latin America is, one note here, as a revered, while the All-Stars have been revered in Latin America and Europe, Marcos gained notice in the U.S. really for this work with the Buena Vista Social Club. He pulled together masters like Ibrahim Ferrer, Pio Lieva, Manuel Isea, Puntila Omara Portundo, Ruben Gonzalez, and the rest of the crew. And they really hit the world, going around the world, bringing the vibration, the story, the illustriousness of Cuban culture, promoting what's called the golden period in Cuban popular music. But he's doing the same thing now looking forward. The All-Stars now not only celebrates and engages the classic legacy elders in the genre, but now reaches into the future by bringing in young people. So if you get a chance to tonight, go down and check out Juan de Marcos Gonzalez, the Afro-Cuban All-Stars there at the Dakota, shows at 6 o'clock and 8:30. My last little story about them is that when they were here before, I think there was at a show at Orchestra Hall, and my brother Wayne and I went down just to and Greg McFarlane to kick it with him after the show. I told him the story, told Juan Gonzalez the story that Wayne had been awaiting a liver transplant. He'd had kidney transplant already, but was put in a medically induced coma when the first transplant didn't work. And he had to wait until another organ was available. And what I did was took to his bedside at the hospital downtown a CD with the Afro-Cuban All-Stars music. And I asked the nurses if it was okay, keep this song playing, keep this CD playing. It was Distinto Diferente, right? And so they played that again and again for several days. Well, Wayne got the right organ. He had the surgery successfully, obviously, and he awakened from the coma speaking Spanish, having traveled new worlds and discovering new stories about our culture, all thanks to the visionary healing work of the Afro-Cuban All-Stars. So we stand in testimony to the power of this music as an agent of reconnecting the past and the future and the healing power of now. Well, again, obviously I'm a fan. I invite you to be a fan too and go down and check them out tonight at the Dakota Jazz Club. Next item in Hot Topics. All of us have been concerned about, and I continue to beat the drum about what's happening at the legislature. And it's so important because we've described the current situation in St. Paul as a trifecta, meaning that you've got our governor and you've got the Senate and the House all under the control of the DFL party. It's a wonderful arrangement because by this configuration, things can get done. And it still means you have to recognize the bipartisan nature and structure of governance. And even if, a majority exists, there are going to always be points of view that are in contrast to others. And so there's never a guarantee that something will happen. Well, a couple things that have happened that are important. DFL-led Minnesota Senate has sent legislation to the governor's desk for signature that restores voting rights for people with felony convictions once they leave prison. And another bill allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain a driver's license followed as well. So on Tuesday, the Senate approved the Restore the Vote measure on the 35 to 30 vote. That proposal impacts more than 50,000 Minnesotans who are disenfranchised because of current state rules for people with felony records. That, according to the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. State law right now allows people to cast a ballot after they complete their sentence, including time for probation or parole. This bill allows them to vote once they're out of prison. 21 other states have similar policies, and that'll soon be law here in Minnesota. We'll talk to Corey Day about this and other legislative matters in a moment. The other thing that I put out to you as a hot topic, Minnesota's $17.5 billion budget surplus remains largely unchanged from previous estimates. It's a story I'm taking from CBS Minnesota, and the story says that the Minnesota management and budget officials announced Monday that the state's budget and economic outlook are stable. The outlook is stable with a $17.5 billion balance projected for the next biennium. The surplus largely unchanged from November projections. State budget officials say the individual and corporate franchise tax forecast is up by and offset by inflation. The February economic forecast is slightly down from the November forecast of 17.6 billion, but tax revenues since those projections have increased. This forecast, for the first time in 2 decades, includes the impact of inflation on spending estimates, adjusting that top line surplus number. So what does this budget number tell us? The legislature is crafting in the next 2 years a budget for 24 and 25 based on the spending and revenue projections detailed in the report. We'll go into that in a minute, but it's good to, for me, from my point of view, to keep in front of you, to keep in front of our community, a conversation about the working of governance, about our state and our role in the governance of the state, our role in determining how that money is going to be spent. And I think Black people, we have to say that our voice matters, our presence matters. And with allied communities and communities of color, with allies in the arena of progressive politics, we need to ensure that we get what we say is equitable investment in our community. You'll see in Insight News every week through the end of the legislature, we're running a promotional information page of some legislative concerns put forth by the United Black Legislative Agenda. And I think tomorrow I've got Al Flowers on, others on, talking about the UBLA legislative agenda. Well, that's enough for that right now, because I want to bring in my friend Corey Day from Blue Ox Strategies to fill in the blanks and to raise more questions about the legislative process. In addition to directing, well, first of all, Corey Day has got decades of experience managing political advocacy and public affairs campaigns. He's worked coast to coast, helping candidates, organizations, corporations, and advocacy groups at local, state, and federal level. In addition to directing a variety of state and field operations for the presidential campaigns of John Kerry, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, Corey served as the longtime executive director of Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, where he helped oversee the party's local, state, and federal election campaigns. Through his many years of managing campaigns, Corey Day possesses a unique understanding and perspective on how to build coalitions and how to leverage grassroots organizing to help candidates and organizations achieve their goals. He's also managing the Minneapolis office of New Partners. He's utilized what's called innovative field and media campaigns to help his clients build affinity with consumers, voters, activists, and donors. Corey Day, my friend, good to see you. Thank you for being here. How are you? Welcome to the conversation.
Hey, Al, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you again.
Always good to have you on. You can kind of jump in wherever you want to. I led with those two hot topics about the bills that are being passed, the voting bill. Let's talk about that first. What does that really mean? Why is it important? And how long has this movement been afoot?
You know what? The movement's been going on for multiple sessions for years in this state and around the country. Right now, we've seen that our democracy is in trouble. And the one thing that this trifecta showed us that when Democrats are in charge, things can get done. And the one thing we've seen thus far is bills when it comes to the Crown Act, Juneteenth, democracy bills when it comes to felony voting. We're looking at trying to make sure also with automatic registration, there are things that are being pushed with Democrats having control of both bodies in the governor's office. And so these bills are critical. I mean, it's critical for the thousands and thousands of people who had their rights taken away where they weren't allowed to vote in the state as citizens. So this is going to be something very interesting in the next election cycle. It's going to be very interesting to see how we start organizing and engaging those folks who've been restored their rights. And, you know, I'm excited. And you saw that at the Capitol. You saw those folks in the Rotunda fighting and arguing to make sure they got their rights back, and how excited they were to know that they can go to a ballot box and be an active citizen in this country and put their vote forward. So I think the democracy package is extremely exciting. I'm excited so far that this legislature has been moving these bills at a neck breaking pace. We're actually getting things done in this state right now. And with that $17.5 billion budget surplus, hope we're going to spend that money in the right way that's going to help folks in our community.
Let's focus on that. You know, how does, say, for ordinary people, Corey, how does a person understand what it means to have a budget surplus of $17 billion? We're used to in our community always being told that when we want things that help solve problems in the Black community, yeah, we want to do it. We sympathize, we feel for you, but we just don't have the money, or it's the war that's a priority, or it's the epidemic that's a priority, or it's the always something that puts us on the back burner, our concerns, our lives on the back
Mm.
burner, or as I say, in the margin. So now we've got a unique situation where you have a trifecta, you have a power
Mhm.
alignment that is different and potentially eventful for us, and you've got money.
Yeah.
How did the state develop a $17 billion surplus? First of all, how does that happen?
Well, they didn't spend the money. Obviously, taxes, revenue. I mean, it's, obviously it's a numerous amount of things of how you can kind of build this surplus up. We're a state that pays a lot of taxes. We pay a lot of taxes throughout the state, and we're a state that also makes sure that we've been very good when it comes to the way we've held our money. In the last few sessions, you can see we haven't spent any money on these programs when the Republicans were in charge. The money all just sat in that fund. So I think the big thing that we really need to look
And
at.
the Republicans want to just give the money back, right? They
Yeah,
want to
right.
refund the
Well,
money, and they make
it's
it sound
actually,
like they want ordinary people to get money, but their real intent, from what I can see, is to line the pockets of the rich again.
that's
Am
exactly
I right
right.
or wrong?
That's exactly right. I mean, for some reason, they believe that these bridges build themselves and these roads pave themselves. That's just not the case. And the reality of them wanting to give money back to these big corporations and to some of these folks, more or less corporate tax returns back to the folks of big business who line their pockets and their campaign coffers is ridiculous. I mean, the one thing that, and I was watching one of your older shows with Bill English, and I know you guys had this a very
Mhm.
robust discussion about this. I think one of the things that we just have to look at as we have this great surplus of billions and billions of dollars is to make sure that when it comes to our community, that we're very specific about what our needs are. One thing that I say about Black folks in Minnesota, we've been great coalition partners. We've helped a lot of our friends when it comes to driver's licenses and other issues that are important to everybody when it comes to public safety, and then just making sure that folks have the things they're going to need when it comes to an ID, getting insurance, and other things along those lines. But we have to also be very, very particular when it comes to our community and that $17.5 billion. When we look at an agenda, we have to make sure that each agenda item has something tied to it. I think we have to look at things not in platitudes, but in bills and in bill language, and make sure that those dollars are going to the place that we know. We know, not some committee down in St. Paul or some commissioner or some agency, but folks who has to live this day to day where that money needs to be and how it's going to help this community. So the one thing that I'm really hoping to see is that we can't count on St. Paul telling us how to spend the money. We need to make sure that we are very particular, precise about where that money needs to go and how it's going to help community, economic development, if it's transportation, jobs, education, whatever it might be. We need to make sure that we're putting bills to all of our agenda items. So we're talking to the great Senator Bobby Joe Champion. That article had great write-up this week about his leadership down in St. Paul. We just need to make sure that we're not just talking to our legislators, telling them how we feel, but we need to be putting actual language in front of them of what we need to see done. And so that's the thing that I'm really hoping that as we move forward, when it comes to a Black agenda, when it comes to these items that we really need to make sure that we need help with, that we know that exactly where that money needs to go, that we're not just talking about it. We're actually doing the things you need to do, hiring a lobbyist, putting forth the team, putting the money into it, because let's be real, this doesn't happen unless if you put the money behind it, and then making sure that we're getting our bills drawn up, getting there early, being one of the first to the troughs to make sure that we get these things done.
I think there is a deficit of belief in our community, and that deficit of belief comes from an experience of being stifled, frustrated, being blocked from the seat at the table, and from holding and commanding the levers of power. I think that is changing right now, and that's a good thing, but it's mindful. It's important that we be mindful of the arrangements that existed before, that without saying it, worked effectively to keep us out, suppressed, and down. That day, I
Mhm.
believe, is ending, but if we're not aware, it'll come back again. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Corey Day of Blue Ox Strategies, formerly the head of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, and a smart man, smart about politics and about collaboration and cooperation, community organizing. So, Corey Day, um, what do we have to unpack in our community? You said that we need to be very specific, asking
Yes.
our legislature what to fund, how to fund, and not be timid about it. I remember, Corey, in the past, if leadership in the community would say we're looking for money, we'd be accused by each other of looking for money. you know, and so
Mm.
that would be the first roadblock, and that's an internalization of, I think, supremacist thought that held our own articulation of our own interest as not important. What do you think about that?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think one of the things that we need to do is trust each other. And I think to your point, the challenge that we have is that we have so many different coalitions and different buckets that we create. We live in Minnesota. We're not, we're a large community, but we're not a huge community in this state. Let's be realistic about that. There is no reason in my eyes that we can't come together as leaders in this community, in the different spaces that exist in this community, our faith-based community, our activist community, our public safety communities, and figure out what best can we do when it comes to bringing those dollars to these communities, and not have our needs being so segmented all over the place. But we need to really focus in and really understand what needs to happen when it comes to making and moving our community forward. And like I said, even when you have, we have great legislators right now who are in the mix, who are appropriating a lot of good dollars to a lot of good programs. So there's money that's being moved and that's being put into the community that's going to be helpful. But I think when we look at this from a larger scale, from 30,000 feet, we need to not just figure out, okay, the organizations that exist, right? If it, the Summit Academies of the world and STARS, great organizations that do great work in our community. But we got to start looking at this. Where else can we put our bucket and pots of money? How are we going to redevelop Broadway? How are we going to we need to really come together when it comes to this and then put that to paper, start early. I mean, one of the things that I was somewhat frustrated with, and I'll tell you how, is that the second we won that trifecta, we should have been at the table. We should have all come
Mm.
together. We should have hired a lobbyist. We should have already started putting paper to pen, figuring out what bills we want to bring forth to the legislature. What are we going to try to get passed? We should have had every item of part of that Black agenda, every point should have had a bill tied to it that we started with before. I mean, literally the week after we won both bodies and we had the governor's office. We can't be late to the table. And that's one of the things we've had a challenge with, I think, in the past, is that we come to the table when the session's already a month and a half in, and there's bill, our friends, if it's Esther or whoever it might be, they've already have 35 bills that they've authored and they're going to be dealing with. We need to make sure that we are first in line, our agenda is first in line, that we're, and I always say one of the things, and this goes back to your point of trust, right? Some of these things we have to trust each other and know that this is a process. There's a way that a lot of these organizations and some of these more I'll be outright white organizations and some of these organizations that are not of our community, how they're moving things forward is a level of trust of saying, okay, we're going to put the money up early. We're going to hire folks. We're going to get researchers in there. We're going to do all the pieces so that when we get to the legislature, there's no excuses. There's no, oh, you're too late or this is already happening. No, we're first in line here. This is our bill. We know the money's there. This money, this money has been spent in this community. I don't know, in the last five or six sessions, it's time to start spending money in our community. So the one thing I'm really hoping is that, we continue to fight this session and make sure that the things that we know are important get funded. There's a lot of one-time dollars in there. We need to figure out ways to make sure we're spending that. But then also, I really believe that we need to put our thoughts, these items, as I look at, the 7-point economic, employment, housing, education, what exactly do we want from those different points. What does education mean? Is it? I know there's a Teachers of Color Act going on right now in the legislature, which would, like $100 million to that. But what else can we do? What else do we need to make sure that our folks are starting to get their piece of the pie when it comes to that budget and the dollars that are moving around the state of Minnesota that we have for so long been neglected of?
What is a reasonable number that we should have in our minds? If the budget surplus is 17.4 billion, what is reasonable given our numbers, our participation, and also given the fact that we've been sort of systematically excluded? Should we be talking about over coffee, for example, a $1 billion ask for Black Minnesota? Is it a $500 million? Is it 1.5 billion? How do we get ourselves attuned, acclimated to the articulation in a number, right, of what our relative engagement ought to be? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a broad question. I think when it looks at a number, you look at the budget, you look at what's being spent out of that bucket, right? If it's health and human services, or if it's education, or whatever committee it's coming out of, I think we have to just look at what kind of dollars are being spent, and then we can make a kind of an assessment of how much of that should be coming our way. But not just that. I think what we need to look at it in the context of what the need is, right? So if the need is $500 million for, trainings for our folks to make sure that we're bringing them up to speed when it comes to solo or whatever it might be, or retraining programs, then that's what we should ask for. I mean, we should look at how much money it's going to take for us to achieve what we're trying to achieve and make that ask. I don't think we should, and sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less. It's obviously a negotiation, and there's obviously a lot of a very competitive kind of atmosphere at the Capitol when it comes to folks competing for these dollars. But I don't think we should look at it in the case of a pie. I think we should look at it in need. And if the need is $1 billion, then let's go out there and try to get our $1 billion and figure out how we make that happen. If it's public and private, it's going to the city, making sure that Jacob has it in his budget. I mean, I think we have to just be smart, but strategic about it. And I think that is the key, is being very strategic about the needs that we have and not giving them any excuses not to meet those needs. And I think in the past, I think we've given some folks excuses not to meet the needs that we have. I think what we need to do moving forward is make sure that we don't give them any excuses to put roadblocks or obstacles in our way, any excuses of why. Like you said before, and you're not wrong at all, Al, there's always some reason. It's always maybe next time, maybe in 2 years. Well, you know what? That's unacceptable. Now is the time. Now the money is there. The trifecta is there. Trifecta that we helped make sure happen. We've been very loyal to this party. We've been very loyal to those members that are there. It is time that we make sure we push them to make that they look at our agenda the same way they look at other communities' agendas around this state that have become priorities. While we're still, when it comes to economics, we're not, we're still in the back of the line, and it's gotten to the point where that's unacceptable.
Let me shift for the last question here. You and I spoke briefly about the unsettling story involving city council member for 4th Ward in Minneapolis, Latricia Vitale, who was, it appears to me, accosted, at least verbally, by a resident and activist, and that story has kind of gone viral. Can you talk about what happened and what the pitfall is there? Is this confrontation a Black man challenging a Black woman who is seated in city council in a way that I believe was inappropriate, overly aggressive, and creates that chasm that allows others to say, see, I told you. They don't need to be in power, or they're going to implode on each other. What happened, first of all? We got about a minute and a half.
Yeah. I mean, look, the city council takes some tough votes, and not everybody's going to agree on exactly the direction that the council takes it, but they voted on it. They made their decision, and we need to move forward. Both sides have their opportunity.
And the vote was about a facility, right? About renovating or removing
the depot. So they made the decision. But what you don't want to see is this kind of aggressive violence. And I'll even go as far as that. I hate this. And to me, the fact that it's going against a Black woman the way that was, I mean, she's not the only member of council who took that vote, but there's some kind of weird, I don't know, thing in the air right now where that it's okay to attack a Black woman the way that she was attacked. And she was attacked. I mean, when someone comes to someone and pushes them almost off the escalator, puts a phone in their personal space, that's not acceptable. And I think one of the things we're starting to see, we talk about it on the right all the time, how, you know, how there's this Trump and mega America that's going on. But let's be honest here. We have our own issues here when it comes to kind of the left or the progressive center, that folks are thinking that it's okay to get physically violent against a sitting member of Congress. This is why we don't get great elected officials, because they have to deal with things like that, putting themselves in danger. For Jacob, having his family threatened. I mean, this is unacceptable. And the progressive left has got to realize you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. You make your argument, but we need to work together. And what the councilwoman went through is unacceptable. My total support is out to her. And no one should be able to get into someone's face and physically threaten them at any time, at any moment. And I especially hate to see it to someone as strong as Councilwoman Vita. And the idea that, I feel like we can't make things acceptable to do that to a Black woman in this city either. It's unacceptable.
Corey, thank you. Hang around. We're going to bring you back in for the close of the program. I want to bring in my next guest today. Leahjean, Coach Leah Denley has been navigating life and as a tall girl, and now as a joint venture, a WNBA alum, Sylvia Crawley Spann from North Carolina, 94, and Leahjean, Coach Leahjean Frazier, she's known now, Leahjean Denley, a former WNBA scout and Division I coach. She was at Tennessee Tech in '87. The two of them are collaborating their passions and expertise off the court in a world of business, of technology, of social networks, health and wellness, and fashion to form an alliance uniting tall women of all generations, not just from around the country, but globally. How exciting. Coach Leah, welcome to the conversation, and welcome back to your home as a writer, Insight News. Congratulations on making the connection so that you resume as the sports editor for Insight News.
Oh my God, I'm so super excited about this new journey that we'll be embarking together. So thank you. I'm so happy to be back, Al. Thanks.
Well, I wanted to take this time, Coach Leah, just to refresh people on your stellar career here in Minnesota. You've left an imprint on the mind and spirit of young people and of the community. So walk us through, Coach Leah, your story.
Okay, so the Cliff Notes version of that would be that I was born and raised on the south side of Minneapolis, and went to Washburn High School and had a chance to compete in the state tournament 3 consecutive times there. Through those pursuits and through the help of sports journalists back in high school, I was able to be named one of the top 50 players in the country. And through USA Today, during their inaugural year of their paper being in publication. And but what people don't realize is that there was a gentleman that was the sports information director at Tennessee Tech that was originally from St. Paul, Minnesota. And so that's how I ended up getting to Tennessee Tech, because he was the sports information director there. And played there, had an opportunity to play for the legendary Marinelle Metters, who started the women's program at Tennessee Tech. She's one of the type of people that started things from scratch, and that's where I vicariously know that I got that from. Our coaches end up becoming our mothers many times. And so she left Tennessee Tech, started when the WNBA, their first seasons, started the Charlotte Sting. She left there, and when it expanded, started the Miami Soul. Fun fact there is that she used her first pick to select Tamara Moore, who is from Minnesota. So I was really happy to see that and allow for and have that opportunity to be allowed for Tamara. And she did an amazing job for the Miami Soul, as well as the Lynx when she came to came home to play for the Lynx as well. Marinelle left there, started with the next expansion, started the Atlanta Dream, head coach and GM there. And that's where I had my opportunity to serve as a scout, advanced scout for the WNBA, working under her tutelage. And so it was really kind of cool. But through all those pursuits and during all those pursuits, one thing that was very important to me is that I had the opportunity to give back to the community. We call it paying it forward many times, because you can never really give back.
Right.
You just can't. You want to, but that wasn't the reason why many people helped you. They did it because they just did, right? And the community embraced me because they just did. You and everybody else, I'm so indebted. And so it's my opportunity now to pay it forward. And by starting the nonprofit, the Fraser Foundation, and then my Diamond program, Diamond in the Rough Showcase and Celebrity Shootout, which you you sponsored many aspects of that back in the day. And we're looking forward to doing some more fun things here in the future as well. But, I really can't I can't say more about just the experiences and the doors that open through athletics, through basketball, the connections that have been made. I've learned that my superpower is making connections. And so moving forward, and it's my goal and my honor actually to continue to make those connections and use those opportunities, these fun stories, and to create even more experiences through my journey.
You're in Texas now, right?
I am. And I am. So Houston, Texas is home. Every time somebody asks me, as the word has gotten out that I'm back with Insight, are you moving? Folks at church are like, wait a minute, you got a job here. I work part-time at my church, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, technology is amazing.
Isn't it great?
COVID taught us a lot. COVID taught us so much about how we can really be different places at the same time.
Yeah. It's cool. Speaking of that, I have editors like you, Leah, in Bahia, leading up the Afro Descendientes project. I have a features writer in Cape Town, doing byline stories for the newspaper, and I have a beat reporter who's stationed in Kenya, who's covering a certain set of city council meetings. And so the technology is amazing, and it means we can build and be community globally. And so what you are doing is not only dealing with your experience, your actual footprint here in Minnesota and in Tennessee and in Texas, but as you said, as your bio said, you're creating a world community using technology. So talk about what that means to you. How do you envision being connecting and a connector to the world?
Thank you for that. I like to think that we will never be defeated by technology. Sometimes it frustrates us. It doesn't do exactly what we need it to do. But when it's firing on all its cylinders, it's amazing in that it can create this and connectivity through just the mere fact that I can see you and you can see me. We can not only just hear each other, but the body language means a lot as well. You can tell a lot by things that are actually unspoken, by being able to see or be in somebody's space. And so that doesn't automatically necessarily mean you're in the same room, but at least in the same space. Right now, we're together on this screen.
And since we're doing this on radio live as well on KFAI, let me add to that the magic of radio is that it captures and allows you to engage your mind's eye. And so I am convinced every time I'm live on the radio that everybody listening is listening both with their ear and their inner eye, they're seeing this conversation and imagining it and seeing it and themselves in the conversation. So yes, the technology is phenomenal. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. I like to think that I'm a multimedia content creator.
Mm-hmm.
Because you make a very, very good point. I like to tell people that I'm a storyteller, like yourself. And so when you're telling stories, you have to be able to bring also the essence for people who can't actually see, which I was going to actually get to that point as well. Which is why I feel like audio is, and just hearing is important still as well.
Mm.
It's not as easy to get the clicks. As some of our younger generations will say, clickbait and all that other stuff. But, if you're telling a very compelling story, somebody that can't see you can still visualize themselves being in that space with you as well. And so, that's my goal with this go around with Insight News, is to bring stories to life, to use multimedia, to not just have what we're going to call after the whistle, the vodcast, meaning that it's visually, something that you can see, but that it definitely will show up in print so people can read the article, the interview, but then they can also hear the interview through radio and podcast platforms. And so I never knew back in the day when I was getting my journalism degree in undergrad, and when I felt disheartened by how sometimes news is slanted to tell a particular story in a way that didn't agree with myself and my spirit, and then had gotten out of that field. But the opportunities that you've afforded and some others that have afforded, including my job at church, because I work on our communications team there, and I'm a producer and a talent coordinator there. And I also do a lot with our graphics. My official title is graphics administrator, but you probably understand that there's a little line that always says in other duties as assigned.
That's right.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Chris McKinney and my senior manager at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church in Houston, that the other duties as assigned are always gratefully accepted. But my point is, I'm happy to know that I had that base in undergrad. I've never lost the passion for what journalism can do and what storytelling can do, and want to be able to tell the stories about sports figures, not necessarily about the X's and O's though, because it's just a small chapter in a anthology, as I like to say, of a person's life.
Let me bring Corey Day back in just to broaden the conversation. And Corey, thank you for being here. Leah, thank you for that introduction to your leadership here at as the editor, sports editor for Insight News, and the dynamic approach that you're bringing to this next level engagement. And what I wanted to have you both talk about is the question of how we connect with young people. You both have talked a little bit about that, about new and young and progressive. Corey, you said progressive, right? The implication progressive often is young, younger, new age type thing. And so what do we need to do, Coach Leah and Corey Day, to be intentional about keeping our culture vibrant, accessible, malleable, but real and supportive to our very existence and our ability to show up in the world in our authentic selves? Coach, what do you think?
So the first thing I'll say is we have to make sure that we are intentionally multi-generational, meaning that it's important that we understand the language, we understand kind of pop culture per se, things that are trending. These are some terms that our younger contemporaries, kind of thrive on. But we have to be there.
Corey Day, what do you think? How do we stay connected with young people and move the ball forward and not lose all the work that has gone before?
Yeah, I think one of the things that at least I've discovered when it comes to just talking to younger generations and folks who are not of our age is you just can't talk down to folks, right? I think one of the things we see, at least in the advocacy kind of realm, and when we see kind of an activist realm, is that if you talk down and kind of belittle kind of those younger generations, you turn them off. And I think the one thing that I think one why Barack Obama was so successful and generating and activating so many young people. The same with even Bernie Sanders, is that they never talked down to him. They told him to it straight. They gave him the real dirt. And I think when you really communicate with folks on that level, you're going to be able to garner them. You're going to engage them. I think they'll be more involved. But I do think the key to it is that we always had a tendency to actually try to talk down to folks and have this deal where we just kind of thought maybe you don't understand it. And generate.
How young
Oh,
is
no, yeah.
young when it comes to talking about politics and about governance, about justice, about education? What is young? Let me
I
raise
think
the
the
question this
20s are
way.
young. I think
I
folks, I
remember.
think college
Go ahead.
in their 20s, I consider that young just for the sake that you're kind of growing into your own, but there's also an element of cynicism that exists within that generation when you believe your vote doesn't matter, your voice doesn't matter. The folks who are, in this case, Generation X and up, they're the ones running this world and making these decisions. Why does it matter what I do? And I think when you actually speak to folks at their level, when you bring the message to them and you actually do not talk down to them, then you're bringing them aboard where you actually make it feels like their thought and their opinions count and matter. So
Mhm.
when I say young, I look for me, what young is any of these folks kind of in their 20s or these recent graduates where I'm not going to pretend I know what they're listening to on the radio, and I'm not going to pretend I know all their lingo. But if you do give a damn about climate change, if you care about your community, you care about economics, you care about the direction this world's going in, if you care about your people, then you have to treat them when it comes to these social issues, when it comes to this agenda. You and I, we ain't going to be around forever, and we're both getting a little long in our tooth. We got to bring these folks along, but we can't bring them along totally in baby steps. We got to treat them like the adults that they are, because the
Well,
reality of it is this agenda is real. This affects
that,
people every day.
so that's where I was going to go, and maybe Coach Leah can talk about it too. I remember, Corey. So I'm 75 now, but I tell you, I remember thinking about and having an opinion about the world, and it was an informed opinion when I was
Mhm.
12 years old, 10 years old. I remember thinking and discussing and meditating and worrying, and proposing ideas about the world in my classmate group when we were in the fourth and fifth and sixth grade. So my question really leads to, what do we do as family, as community, to restore the conversation around the dinner
Mhm.
table about our role, our very specific and important role in creation itself, so that we invest in children the tools they need to have their imaginations and their solution making flourish. Can we bring Leah back in? I think we lost you for a second, Coach Leah. There we go. But hopefully you heard the question I was just asking.
I did.
How do we get and how young is too young? I think you really start teaching people about the world when they're born, and maybe even before they're born, by the things you do, the choices you
Mhm.
make. You're really informing a life that you are going to be gifted with the opportunity to be a steward for. Leah, what do you think?
No doubt. I would say that one of the best compliments that I've ever received from my children is that they said that they believe that I taught them how to be critical thinkers,
Mm,
and meaning that I was pretty strict. I was a single mom for much of the time that they were coming up, and but I also allowed for them to ask questions. And then I asked a lot of questions, and because I wanted them to be thinking, and that was one of the things as an educator and as a community engager and as somebody who continues to find opportunities to mentor or share, some type of life experience. It's not necessarily about telling somebody what to do. Obviously, they're going to see what we're doing anyway. So it's always been very important to me to try to model and be what I'm saying and what I'm, preaching per se, to try to be that, because they're watching. And the quickest way to lose credibility with a younger person is to not be aligned with what's coming out of your mouth, what you're doing. And so that's very, very important. And as far as one of the things that I've learned about different young people from all walks of life, from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, is that kids are kids. They really, really are. And if we remember that and remember that there's always an opportunity for some type of learning to happen for them. And again, be intentional. It's not about going about life not being just authentic. As a matter of fact, that's what you have to be, is authentic, because they're going to see it all day, every day.
And Corey, so in the political arena in particular, how do we be intentional in highlighting and lifting up this call to public service, call to the public good, so that our 5-year-olds and our 7 and 9 and 12-year-olds begin to experience accountability with each other that it's kid stuff, but it's also human stuff, and that we have to see that even in the kid relationships, they're talking about compassion, caring, listening, right? Leading, following, sharing, collaborating, visualizing. How do we do that with an eye towards political leadership development? You and I have talked about one of the challenges we've had in the community is having what you and I would call a strong bench, so that when one person does not return to a seat or loses a seat, we've got 8 or 9 people that, in a sense, have allowed themselves to be vetted and ready to compete, but compete in the right spirit, so that we don't lose any positioning, that our issues go forward and are propelled, because we've got a strong reservoir of energy to advance our issues. How do we do that in politics better, Corey Day?
Well, I'll briefly just hit 2 quick points. The first point I would say is mentorship. We have to be better at mentoring young folks, bringing them up, teaching them the ways, being a tool for them, being available to them when they have questions, being someone that they can ask questions of, being able to show them also what's right and what's wrong and the best way to do it. And the other piece that I really have seen over the years, especially here in Minnesota more than anything, is we got to just make sure that our folks believe the possible, right? So we got to believe I can be a senator. I can come up, I can go to law school. We can't have this belief that things are always going to be negative. Things are always going to be bad. There's no way that I can do that. I will tell you this, in other communities, they're instilling to them believing that you can do anything. And we have to be better at making sure that our young folks know that, it's not, I played football. I love sports, but that is not just the way we break that ceiling. There are so many other possibilities for growth and for you to achieve and for you to be on top. And I think what we have to do is make sure that as we mentor and we deal with younger folks, and like you said, Al, you're right, it's cradle to, it's cradle to the grave. You're always teaching and trying to instill that in folks, that they understand that what you want to do, if you work, you put it in, you work hard, go to the grindstone, put your head down and just get it done. It's possible for it to be done.
So can I piggyback? I'm sorry, Al. I have to piggyback on what Corey had just said, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
The mentoring piece is so important. And one of the things that I have designed is mentee-led mentoring. Because the only way that we can really, truly be a good mentor to somebody is for that mentee to see some value in us in the first place, so they'll listen and to create that. So Corey, you're spot on with that. And then the second piece to that is sometimes mentors really don't have room to hold space for the mentee. And so by creating opportunities for the mentors to do a self-check to say, okay, can I really hold space for somebody else? Can I really be intentional for caring about them, for instilling all the things that you're talking about, Corey, those values, and be real about that with ourselves as a mentor.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest, Coach Leah, Leahjean Denley, new sports editor, returning sports editor for Inside News, entrepreneur, educator, mentor, leader, a light in our community, and Corey Day, the CEO of Blue Ox Strategies, a political activist consultant, a leader in community as well. Let me close. We got about maybe a couple of minutes or three at the outside. And I mentioned a little bit to you, Leahjean, about the global idea. I think thinking global is critical and important. And so how do you see having global impact? Corey, with the world becoming more accessible with technology, what does knowing the world differently mean for our people? Leahjean?
The world is so small. I like to say that I'm 1 degree of separation from anybody. If you talk to somebody within 10 minutes, you usually can find and make that connection. And I found that to be very true on such a bigger scale. So if we're thinking not just within our community, or realizing that our community is the greater piece, that you are also 1 degree of separation from somebody that's way across the world somewhere, because you're going to connect somehow. Corey, I knew that you were an athlete before you even said that you played football, but it was only a small piece of who you are today. And so we connect because we care. You and I connect. I've never met you personally, but we already connect because we are former athletes, but we also believe in very strongly how to make an impact through politics, through policy, and helping young people to understand, in order to make a change, you have to put yourself in a position so that you can be that decision maker. And that typically comes from mentoring. That typically comes from education. Some of the best models for education are in other parts of the world. So we have to study that. And that's where, again, we're making that connection. So again, the superpower.
Connecting. Corey Day, last question, got about a minute left. What happens, how do we nurture global awareness, and how will it work? Actually, we got 10 seconds, last word.
I'll say it really quick. Look, folks just have to look at things beyond your street, your neighborhood, your city, and realize that we're globally connected, but we're also globally competitive. And folks have to just have more of a world view of how you see things, and know that it's bigger than just you. It's bigger than your block. There's a lot more out there, and this battle that we're in is not just us against them, but you're more or less you're competing against the world now, the way that things are connective.
Corey, we got to leave it there. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.